Hi and welcome to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast for athletes, coaches and professionals who want to achieve their goals faster. I'm David Charlton and I'll be sharing proven methods from leading athletes, coaches and experts that will help you get the most from your talent. Today's show is sponsored by Functional Intelligent Training, who are a sports injury clinic located in Gosford near Newcastle upon Tyne and specialise in athlete development, nurturing future champions, strength and conditioning support and excellent rehabilitation services. So a big welcome to today's podcast, where we're going to look at the importance of confidence, which is an integral part of mental toughness, and we'll explore traumatic experiences such as the Yips, motorcycle crashes, missed penalty kicks, where Alessia Bruno is going to give her take on these type of challenges. And Alessia, I'm really excited to talk to today, is a clinical and sports psychologist who has some special tools in her toolkit, such as EMDR and Brainspotting. So welcome, Alessia.
Thank you so much, David, for inviting me. And it's really a privilege and honor to be here today with you. Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to getting into talking about these, I suppose, difficult topics. They're really interesting. I know in the past, personally, when I've played golf, I've had some experiences of the Yips and supporting a number of people at the moment around that. And I'm sure you'll share some fascinating stuff.
I'll try to do my best.
Oh yeah. So firstly, let's talk about confidence in sport. What would your definition of confidence be?
Well, certainly confidence is a very important topic in sport. And it's really about the players' belief in their skills and their ability to achieve a goal, to perform well in a situation, in practice, in a game. It can also vary according to what kind of task the player is asked to perform. Like for instance, a volleyball player might be really good at spiking, but less confident in their defensive way. The same might happen, for a baseball player, might be confident in hitting and less confident in the defensive play. And there can be several factors that might affect the confidence. It's not just about the history of performance. Being myself a clinical psychologist as well as a sports psychologist, I would look at the performance according to the performance history itself, but also in relation to the history of the person. Because especially in a professional athletes, top and elite athletes, when you talk about the sport they play, the sport is really about their identity. And that's why the history of the personal history plays an important role. And also in terms of affecting the confidence, if for instance we think about the upbringing of an athlete, might have had very critical parents and or very perfectionist parents, or a quite tough coach in the past, and this might have affected the confidence. So there can be like situations, like external situations. For instance, a runner who is supposed to run might feel more confident running the marathon in autumn compared to winter because of some weather condition. Confidence might be affected by our history, but also by the task we have to perform. So it's important also for the athletes to identify when they feel more confident, where they feel more confident, because in terms of positive psychology, we want to look at the resources as well. And it's important to boost those resources and be able, what kind of source the athletes can access to in order to improve the confidence and like mainstream approaches, probably in terms of sports psychologists, that would focus on addressing negative self-talk or negative intrusive thoughts, or instilling positive belief, applying strategies, practicing more what they don't do well enough. But in terms of the approach I use, in order to address confidence, as well as in the present, I will be looking at the factors that in some ways have determined the self-view of the athlete. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. You've shared some fascinating points really there, where you talk about even like life experiences and how they can impact on confidence.
Yeah.
If I think back to some people I've worked with and spoken to, it might be that a breakdown in a relationship can then have a negative effect on someone's confidence. And if their perspective around that isn't clear, they may go on and make some daft decisions. They might, I don't know, change their technique in their sport. They might sack their coach or something like that. So yeah, a really valid point. The other one which interests me nowadays, video analysis is used an awful lot in sport, and how different coaches actually present the video analysis, I would imagine, would also have an impact on confidence. Would you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that is fair. If you think also about like young athletes, when these are people who are still working on developing the view of themselves, their identity, and the self-esteem is more, generalizing is more frail, compared to the one of an adult. And actually they really look up at the coaches. And so the way the coach deliver, the suggestion, consultation, and criticism makes a huge difference in the athletes improving or actually increasing or decreasing the degree of confidence. But when I think about young athletes, also the parents might have an impact. As we know, David, like you work with young athletes as well. At a time they might really, if the young athletes fail, the parents might be quite harsh and critical. And this will have an impact on the athlete who will feel disapproved. And the same, so when we work with young athletes, we also have to be even more cautious about how we deliver criticism, how we do the analysis, how we want to provide some suggestion, for improvement. But yeah, the way it's really about communicating, effectively and communicating in order to maybe improve what has not been done correctly, but without affecting, without undermining the self-confidence of the person.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to a parent after their son or daughter's finished a performance, for example? Because it's so easy for the parent to instantly just go in there, oh, you were terrible at this, or
yes.
What was the score? Something like that.
Yes, this does happen. It so does happen. Not just in sport, really in general, it's really about how you provide constructive criticism. And I use the metaphor of a sandwich, which is good, bad, good. And so you might want to start, first of all, never criticize the person, but you might criticize the performance. So it's not the person who has been who's a failure, but that specific task failed, which is very different. So you would just start by encouraging, the young athletes and say, well, you did a really good job. I can see that you are really focused and you trained really hard for this game. But you know what? How about next time when you do this hit, for instance, if it's a player, when you do this hit, how about try to do it this way, or just have a chat with the coach? Might really be helpful in addressing you, the technique. But I'm really proud of you because I really think you did your best. So it's really about good, bad, good. Not really criticizing the person, but the task, the behavior. Yep. So they don't identify themselves with failure. Does it make sense, David?
It certainly does, yeah. You're then trying to take the emotion, the personal emotion away from the scenario there, and also by focusing on the good a few times, they should ideally be uplifted by the experience and motivated to try and make some changes going forward.
And especially they have to feel that they are okay, they are okay no matter how they perform, because they can improve, they can. And actually, if we think about motivation, excessive criticism doesn't improve motivation, actually decrease motivation, because what really is a fuel for motivation is good reinforcement, and so if you tend to be excessively critical when you do something bad, or you really beat yourself up. And when you do something good, you just take it for granted. Okay, yeah, well, everyone can do that. So you're never happy, you're never satisfied with yourself. And if you're never satisfied with yourself, you're excessively critical, your motivation is going to be affected in the sport. But we learn to be like that from our parents, our coaches. And that's why it's really important. The role is fundamental. And a great coach and a great parents really makes a difference in the performance.
I suppose what you're talking about there is nearly linking towards perfectionism, and lots of athletes in many sports are always searching for perfection. And that can be because of, like you say, the language of parents or the language of coaches and the way they then go on to interpret different events.
And if you think it's very stressful to be perfect all the time, and it really goes against human nature, and it really gets you very, very anxious. So it's not as effective, the perfectionist approach, as they would think it is.
Yeah, which guides us quite nicely towards the motor skills issues, be it the yips in golf or snooker or other sports there. So, yeah, I see a lot where a putting stroke in golf has to be done perfectly. And that then causes anxiety, bad memories, and in some cases, in fact, in somewhere between 32 to 47% of serious golfers, they are then affected by the yips. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Actually, yeah, it's a very important topic, especially in some sports, like baseball, snooker, and golf, as well as others, because they really, the yips are very debilitating. They really affect performance, and they feel they can't control them, and it's a type of performance anxiety. At the end of the day, is really about feeling worried about your performance, and as we know, anxiety can have different level of intensity, and when it's very intense, can turn into a panic attack, which is all this symptoms, very physical symptoms, like dizziness, sweating, palpitation, shortness of breath, and the yips fit into the anxiety, the performance anxiety problem, because they are like some physical problems, like spasm, that they can have. And think about a golfer. I mean, if you can't control these motor skills, it's not gonna perform well, But then the more he tries to control it, the more rigidity creates into his body, and so it definitely doesn't perform well. And so it becomes like a vicious cycle. The more you get frustrated, the more you try to control, the more you tense up, and the more the task fails, basically. Something I wanted to say, that actually some, as you probably heard as well, some famous athletes who didn't have Sasser, the baseball player, the American baseball player, was really became really famous for the yips problem. And at that time probably they weren't the right treatment for him, and he had to end his career prematurely. So let's think, for a professional player, like a professional golf player, this is really debilitating. Is a serious problem, and definitely needs to be addressed.
Thing is, as well, it can seep into other parts of their game. If they're a golfer struggling with the yips and the putting, it can then go into their chipping and into other areas and really affect them. And if, let's face it, if they're professional, then they're likely to have financial worries from it, and a whole range of things. They might end up giving up the sport. So it is a huge thing.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, because obviously for them, it's not like somebody has this yips in a different context. It's really about, it's really what you need to control, and the yips don't allow you to control what you need to control. And what you need to control is fundamental in order for you to progress in your career, and have a contract and continue to be a golfer. So there is a lot on stake for them. Yeah, it's really difficult.
And I know when I've personally experienced it a few times, it's like the world stops, or it can feel like things just start happening at about 1,000 miles an hour. Your heart races. you're embarrassed because people are watching you, you're frightened. There's just so much to it.
Yeah, definitely, because in anxiety, like performance anxiety, which then can manifest with these yips, is very common. And if you think about what they go through, athletes, especially professional athletes, they have a lot of stake. They might have, they might train for so many years to go to the Olympic, or they might have a really important competition. They are frequently on newspapers and criticized, and they by fan, but they might not be able to have a new contract, and they feel all the pressure of everyone looking at them, feel judged. So it's quite overwhelming for them.
Are you able to explain what actually happens in the brain when this type of overload by fear occurs?
Yeah, something definitely happens in the brain. It's not out of the blue. Actually, there are very interesting processes when this fight or fly response occur, or freeze response in the worst scenario. We have a very primitive brain when it comes to danger. We are much like our ancestors, in a way, reptilian ancestors. But the difference with the animal kingdom is that after they experience like stressful events and traumas, in their case maybe more like being eaten by a predator, they seem to, once the threat is over, to shake it off, like the energy. But the difference with us is that we seem to continue to store this energy in our brain, and this is when the symptoms flares up, when we manifest the yips or other blocks or panic attack. There are, just going back to the different parts of the brain that are involved with trauma and intensive fear. As you read about the limbic system, you might have heard of the hippocampus, amygdala, hypothalamus, thalamus, and all these different parts of the brain serves a function. So the thalamus, for instance, is like a central station. It's like a driveway of our brain, and kind of process all the incoming auditory and visual information from the external world. And then we have the cortex, which figures out whether something is threatening or not and needs further attention. We have the amygdala, that is like the fire station that is like, it's really the center of fear and activates the fear response. And then we have the hippocampus, which is like the storage of memories. We also have the locus ceruleus, which is the part that sends all the different responses of fear, like increase in heartbeats, shortening of breath, sweating. And so what happened basically is when there are the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, which is really important, that turns off the alarming signal. So when we hear something or we see something, like something moving very fast or a very loud noise, we get scared first. And then the prefrontal cortex says, no, you don't need to worry about it. It's just a truck, it's nothing dangerous, it's just somebody who ran really quickly. And the first thing in order to for our species to survive is to get scared. We have to get scared first in order to survive, because we have, as I was saying before, we have this primitive brain, this very old ancient brain, the reptilian brain. And so in order for us to survive, we have to get scared first. And when we get scared, there are other areas like, for instance, the hypothalamus, which has connection with the pituitary gland and release cortisol. The cortisol is the hormone of stress. But then the release of this cortisol doesn't really allow memories to be stored correctly. So they get stored fragmented in a fragmented form. And this is when we have flashback, when we are not over a negative experience, because high level of cortisol, which interferes with the right storage of memories in the hippocampus, results in the person having the memory stored in a somatic form. So the person talks about a negative experience and gets activated. So might feel like very physical symptoms and physical discomfort, as if the situation was still happening, as if was still in the present. So with the technique I use, like Brainspotting or EMDR, what we do is to unblock this traumatic material in the brain, process it, and store it in a functional way, so that when we think about it and when we talk about this traumatic experience, we don't get activated and we really feel it belongs to the past. When this doesn't happen, because it's too intense, or it's just one big event that is overwhelming, or there are consecutive smaller events, but it's like constantly getting stress, these memories don't get stored correctly, they are fragmented. And so physically, what happens physically, we go back to the sympathetic nervous system, we have this fight and flight response. But we have a fight and flight response also when the danger, the threat is not present. Just because we feel it is still in the present. And just the thought of doing that competition, the thought of doing that hit, the thought of going to the same, football pitch where I had a bad injury, all this kind of stuff gets me activated. Although I might not experience any further negative, experience. But because it's in the present, we get activated all the time just by thinking about it, by talking about it, by reliving the situation with meeting people who belong to that specific trauma, or being in the situation and in the place where we experience the trauma. So like when I saw a motorcyclist, he had a bad fall, and one of his friends as well during a race got really bad injured. It was in the clinical room with me, but just the thought of it got him really activated. You could see he was reporting his heart pounding, he was not breathing properly, he was hyperventilating, he felt dizzy, and we were not racing in that moment, but the spirit was in the present. So it's really tricky how our brain works when something is really overwhelming. Yeah, but it needs to be processed so that the past is moved to the past and the athlete is free to perform, being focused and lucid in the present.
So if I was an athlete who's experiencing these type of challenges, issues, can you just talk me through what the process looks like when you're using EMDR or Brainspotting?
I'm gonna mention about Brainspotting because it's really an effective treatment for performance anxiety or just traumas, because we know that some sports are really dangerous. As I said, cyclists can die, so there are really some dangerous sports. And how it would work? Well, first of all, I would give some psychoeducation. So I would explain about how the trauma is locked in the brain with this original intensity and the original charge, and that's why every time he thinks about it, it gets activated. And then it's very much in the body Brainspotting, and so be asking the person where it feels activated in the body, and then because Brainspotting treatment, the therapist work in this way and says where you look at how you feel, we will be searching in the visual fields for brain spot, which are spots in the visual field which direct access to where the trauma is stored in the brain. And then I will just leave in a mindful processing state the client and let him do what he needs to do in order to heal. And what happens is like a domino effect. And the same thing happening in EMDR, this domino effect, but with the EMDR is eye movement rather than eye fixation. And what happens is that there is this domino effect, this free association, as if the person is cleaning all the channels that are in the brain which hold negative memories. And as they do that, with eye movement or with eye fixation, stop feeling the physical discomfort. And when they go back to the target or to the memory, to the topic, to that trauma, they don't feel activated anymore. Where at the topic they wanted to, they came to see you for. It feels very far. It feels old, as if it doesn't belong to them, and they feel really free in their body. For instance, my motorcyclist, he was saying that it was there. It was in the zone. It was really focused. It was just following the flow. It was not thinking. It was not controlling. It was just there in the moment. And that is what athletes need, to be in the moment in order to perform. You can't think about the previous trauma. You can't have anticipatory anxiety about the future, competition when you have to perform in that specific moment, because to be in the zone is something instinctive. It's not something neocortical, it's something deep and subcortical. Am I making sense?
You're making a lot of sense. Yeah. I suppose if we're going back to confidence is a feeling of trust, and with trust and freedom, you've got automaticity in your skills ultimately, and you don't have that at all if you've got like the Yips challenges, or like you say, challenges with in a motorsport.
Yes, yeah. Then that when you're free, you go with trust and freedom and confidence, as you say, your body feels differently. It's not tense. You don't have stomachache. You're not sweaty. You're not tense. You just feel your muscle. They're really fluid. And that is what you need to perform physically as well.
You're talking about the body there, and I would imagine from the outside, if a coach or spectators are looking at these performers, that their body language is going to be 100% different from probably being punched and really nervous to
tensed,
to feeling 7 foot tall and being quite relaxed in the shoulders. So when you go through these using EMDR and Brainspotting, there is it sort of 1-2 sessions, or can it take a longer period of time?
Well, it really depends from the person, because let's say in performance, when you apply, for instance, Brainspotting or EMDR in performance, you don't treat the client as you will do with the clinical population. You focus more on the performance, although the history of the person is important, especially if it has something to do with the performance. For instance, if I have a critical father, and he used to tell me off every time I didn't get the best mark at school, and then I have a critical coach who would tell me off if I don't get everything perfect. These two situations are strictly connected, because the way the coach relates to the athletes remind the father. And so in that case, I would need to work on a bit on the father as well. I would need to reprocess some memories belonging to the father as well, because they feed into the relationship between the coach and the athlete. But in the eventuality that the client is a quite nice history, which is a bit unusual to get the perfect, the perfect life. But if overall it's quite a healthy life, and the problem is only on performance because the person failed previous competition or was badly injured, I will focus only on processing the negative experience related to performance. I wouldn't even look at the history, because the history is fine. So it really depends. I would go into reprocessing the history only if it's strictly related to performance. Otherwise, I'm just focusing on the performance injuries, negative experiences related to that. So these two type of clients would have a different duration in treatment, because one, I will have to go to the past, and so it might take longer, might take some months, maybe fortnightly, meeting fortnightly. The other one might just have, 3-4 meetings, and the work is done. And then another thing that really influences the outcome of how quickly a person heals is really related to the resources the person has, and also the support the person has. Because, for instance, if I work with a young athlete, let's say young athlete, he's dependent on his parents, lives with his parents, and we do a great job together, he feels more confident, and is performing better at the sports, and then he goes home, and at home his father is constantly critical. Mother, doesn't really have a relationship with him unless he performs well. Then the problem starts again, and it's like if I get rid of something and they put another problem in the situation, and in this case the process will be longer. Well, in that case I will need to talk to the parents as well, but what I'm saying that the same situation can happen with the coach. If I'm working on some traumas, on some negative experiences, and maybe some of the experiences might be related to the relationship with the coach, and then it goes to train with that coach, and the coach is still very critical, and the client might not really get better in a few sessions because I get rid of something, somebody else feeds into it.
Yeah, and that's quite interesting because I know when I'm working with these types of scenarios, the way an athlete goes about practicing and competing, I see is really important to be quite systematic in the way you layer some drills that they do. But if an athlete went and jumped straight into potentially competing too soon, that could also have a negative effect. Even if the athlete, the way they went about reviewing their performances, and they were very, very self-critical in that respect, I'm guessing that again could have an impact.
Yeah, definitely. This goes back to the internal factors. There might be some external factors, as we say, the parents and the coaches, but there might definitely be internal factors. Parents might be really loving, and the coach might be a really, caring and competent and a great coach. And the client, the athlete, is very self-critical. But in a way, that is easier. It's an easy job because you just have to focus on that, and it's really about his own perception. And you're working on his brain, you're working on his thoughts and his mind. And so it's just a quicker process in therapy, I can say.
Yeah, no doubt about it. If there's other factors in the mix, like you say, parents and coaches, then there's only potentially so much you can do to stop that. So it has been fascinating. I've really enjoyed this chat.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed talking to you as well.
So if you were to give 3 key takeaways to an athlete who's experienced some sort of traumatic event in their sport, what would they be from this conversation?
Well, first of all, that there is a solution. Doesn't have to abandon his career, because his career and his sport is his life. It's his identity. And we have to make sure we do everything we can do for the athletes to continue his passion. So there are strategies. There are strategies like more the one of mainstream sports psychologists, like visualization, self-talk, addressing the negative feelings, cognitive restructuring. Definitely there are relaxation, all this kind of stuff. And if the problem is in the past, there are reprocessing techniques that we can definitely, like Brainspotting, for instance, that we can definitely apply in order to overcome the past and leave the past into the past and be free in the present and look with hope in the future, because the future is really about what we construct in the here and now, And another important thing is really, and having said that, it's important to be able to assess the subcortical part of the brain, not just the neocortex where the logical thoughts resides, but is really about assessing, the deep instinctive part of the brain's subcortex. And another thing is that I want to mention, maybe is related to also this existential trauma of the COVID, is to be compassionate towards ourselves in terms of performance, because we are experiencing losses on a different level, maybe hours and hours of really hard training, and we can't go to the Olympic. Some fears about gaining weight or losing fitness related to not being able to train as we want to. Some connections with the brain might feel a bit overloaded with all the stuff going on. So we might not perform as well as we used to before the trauma. But as I said, we can expand, we can definitely process the emotional charge, and we can go, especially when you do a post-traumatic growth, you can go beyond the level you were when the issue started. You can even expand more your skills, your abilities, your view, your capacity, your resilience. So there is definitely hope in that. And be compassionate is not about self-pity. It's about understanding human nature. It's about not being perfect all the time, but learn from what we do wrong, but having the drive and the courage to pursue your goal. So that is really what I wish to athletes in the future.
That's really positive stuff, and it does give some hope to performers who are in this sort of situation. So 3 things there were, there are solutions. Again,
Yes.
hope is a big word in that respect.
Yes.
And I like the way you talked about they can actually go beyond and to the next level as well, which is great, because I suppose what you'll find with these type of athletes who are in predicaments like this, they're probably likely to change equipment, to have quick fixes from time to time, and there's never really a proactive long-term strategy to overcome this and to get to the next level. So that is,
it can be maybe just like a quick fix, but you're not really developing, to the next level.
exactly, and which links nicely with the second point where you talked about really accessing the deeper parts of the brain, which is obviously a huge part to it. And then last point there about in effect being kinder to yourself and recognizing that perfection doesn't exist, and again how you analyze and reflect on your performances again is going to have an impact on your brain, and then the way you go on to perform as well. And
yeah, because when we talk about resilience, David, like there is ability to face adversity, and the capacity to face adversity, and you tend to develop resilience actually when you have challenges, when you have traumas, when you have some difficult stuff happening in your life. And when you develop resilience, actually you are stronger. You have something more to offer. And I'm thinking in this period of COVID, probably if you look at this period from a resilient perspective, you can transform your life in a better way. You can learn something from it. You can get better. So I really hope, this is the message that has come across.
That's a great way to finish. I like that. You're right. You can turn difficult events into being a stronger human being and a stronger athlete. No doubt about it. So thank you, Alessia. It's been really good. Great to go through this fascinating topic. Whereabouts can the listeners actually find you?
Well, they can find me on my website. Is www.performanceexpansion.com. That is my life motive: expansion of performance.
I love that. That's great. Well, like I say, thanks very much for your time, Alessia.
Thank you so much, David. It's been such a great pleasure to talk to you.
I'd like to give a big thanks to today's sponsors, Functional Intelligent Training, who are a sports injury clinic located in Gosford, near Newcastle upon Tyne, and specialise in athlete development, nurturing future champions, strength and conditioning support, and excellent rehabilitation services. Thank you for listening to Demystifying Mental Toughness today. To sign up for tips and advice to help you be the best that you can be, go to www.sport-excellence.co.uk and sign up to the Mental Edge newsletter.